Welcome, everybody, to the American Library in Paris. And thank you for joining us tonight for Evenings with an Author, sponsored by Grow at Annenberg. My name is Mayanne Wright, and I'm the docent here at the library. I give the history tour, and I help out with these evening events. And how many of you have never been to the American Library before? Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm going to tell you just a little bit. We're the largest English language lending library on the European continent. Our birthday is next month, and we will be 105. And we are a it's really something. And we're a nonprofit organization open to all. So that's just a little bit about the library. But now let's talk about Sheila, who is with us tonight. We are thrilled to have Sheila Kohler here. And she's our writer in residence right now. And she'll teach us tonight how we can draw inspiration from our memories, our family relationships, and our life experiences to create vivid characters and compelling stories. And some of the other important things we need to consider as we're doing that. Sheila is the author of Once We Were Sisters, a memoir about her relationship with her late sister and her tumultuous family history. I just finished it, read it in 2 days. Exquisite. She is also the author of 11 novels, 3 collections of short stories. Her work has won several prizes, including the O.Henry, and she has taught creative writing at Princeton since 2007. She was a fellow at the Louis B. Cullman Center for Scholars and Writers, and a frequent visiting writer at the American Academy of Rome. Her novel, Cracks, was adapted to the screen in 2008. So what will happen tonight is Sheila will be speaking for about 45 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions. And we would appreciate if you do have a question, if you would write it down. So I have paper and pen. I'll be sitting over there. And so during the talk, if you feel a question popping into your head and you need paper, just send me a little sign, and I'll try to get that paper and pen to you. All right? So let's have a warm welcome, a round of applause for Sheila Kohler.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for coming. It's lovely to see everybody here this evening. I think I'm supposed to talk for about 45 minutes and then open up for questions. But I was thinking that really I could spend 45 minutes just saying thank you to people. But don't worry, I won't. But I would like to start just by thanking the library, first of all, and taking a minute to talk about libraries, because I think it's a good time for us to remember what libraries bring to us in our lives. And I've been particularly fortunate, first of all, being invited here as a writer in residence. So a big thank you goes to the De Groot Foundation and to Claudette, particularly Claudette De Groot, who does such wonderful work for the library and thus for so many of us writers in our lives. I've been back to this library many times, and I've also been a recipient as I had a fellowship at the New York Public Library at the Cullman Center, and that was really a wonderful opportunity just to be in a community of writers and scholars and be able to, once a week we had a luncheon together and we did talks and people were able to communicate with one another, which is the wonderful thing about being in a community of that kind. But I've been here too, again and again, and I did want to thank people, in particular Emma Schulman, who welcomed me here so kindly, and then Audrey Chapuis, who I'm not sure if she's here tonight, but she is the director of the library and runs everything for us. So I was here in 2014 and did a talk on Dreaming for Freud, which was one of my books. that I wrote trying to give a voice to one of Freud's very early patients. Ida Bauer, her name was. And she's called Dora. Freud calls her Dora. And in the Dora case, which as she only stayed 3 months, she walked out after 3 months and decided she'd had enough of that. And I read her case history, and I could sort of understand how she must have felt, because I think only once in the whole write-up of the case do we actually have her direct voice. When Freud, she's mentioning her jewel case, and Freud makes the obvious analogy to that. And she says, I knew you were going to say that. And that's the only time we really hear her. And I felt, well, I want to give this she was 17, and Freud did listen to her. So we do have her life on the page there, and I wanted to try to give her more of a voice. So that was one of my books, which actually just was translated into Serbian, which thrilled me. You're always delighted when something several years later is picked up, particularly by a foreign country. So 2014 and then 2017, I did come and talk about my memoir. And I'll be talking a little bit about that tonight, because I'm going to be talking about using characters that you know in your work. And then I actually did a wonderful program too during the COVID that was all over Zoom with Joyce Carol Oates and Edmund White, two of my colleagues at Princeton and also my mentors. And we talked about what to read, because everybody was isolated and people would actually start reading sometimes, even if they hadn't been doing it for a while. So I think I suggested reading Don Quixote. And because, it's so long for one, so it could keep you engrossed for a long time. And it's funny. It's very funny, Don Quixote, with him tilting at the windmills. And then we have Sancho Panza, too, who sort of brings in the reality of the world. And I want to talk a little bit about that tonight. So I presume that lots of you here are writers or certainly readers. And I thought I would talk about some of the difficulties, the conflicts that we face as writers coming to the page and trying to use our life to write a story that we want to write, right? We have a certain passion, right? Or in my case, what really drove me to the page was my sister's life and what had happened to her. And my sister died when she was very young. She was 39. And she was in the car with her husband, who was driving the car, and it was a dry night. There was no other car in sight, no skid marks on the road. They afterwards took photographs. And the man was not a drinker. He was actually a heart surgeon, ironically. But there was a long history of battering. Anyway, he drove off the road, and she was killed, leaving 6 small children behind her. And I was driven to the page by certain different considerations perhaps, but one was definitely rage and desire for revenge. And I wanted to just put it down and, right away. And my mother, who was still alive at that time, said to me, think of the children, think of the children. So I said yes. And she said, no scandal. I want no scandal. So I more or less was forced, initially anyway, to write this as fiction. And I did again and again and again. And I have so many lost girls that we have here. I think Cracks, example of Cracks, which is a school reunion with one of the girls on the swimming team missing. The various reasons why one comes to the page: loss, anger, a desire to reverse something that's happened to you where perhaps you have been passive in life and now you would like to take a more active role. And that's one of the... before I go into all of this, I wanted to say one more thank you at some length, and that's to the Perret family who are here tonight and who have been kind enough to put me up for my stay. And I wanted to say something about Jeannette Perret. And it's also something that is useful to the writers in the room. It's something about sharing your work. Because Jeannette, I met at the Institut Catholique. We both were studying together. She was a little older than I was, and she was a French speaker. And she was a great help to me. Those of you who know the French system, there is the oral exam here, right? And she coached me for some of that. It's a terrifying exam. It's the best way to examine someone, I believe, because you can tell what they don't know, very quickly. Those of you who've done this know what I'm talking about. So then they push you on those particular points. Anyway, she helped me through all of that. And then she would come once a week to have lunch with me. I would give her lunch, and she would then listen to me, and I would read to her. And this is something for the writers in the group. I would, if you can find a good friend like that, who will listen to you or who will read you. But she had to listen to me because I had to translate what I had written. So it was a most laborious process. So the poor lady sat there, and occasionally I would look up and she would be, a little noddy, and then occasionally she would give me a good word of advice where she would say, Sheila, c'est peut-être un peu trop, quoique Victor Hugo, après tout, it's a bit much, but Victor Hugo would do the same. So she kept me going for many, many years, and I miss her that she's not here in Paris on this particular stay, and I'm very grateful to her family for being here this evening. So to get back to this duality, I'm going to talk about some of the dualities that one faces as a writer. So you come to the page with what you want to say. In my case, it was revenge or rage or whatever. You might have something that you feel very strongly about, that you want to describe your emotion. But there is also the reader, right? There is you with what you want to write about, and there is the reader who is also coming and looking for his or her story, right? So the reader wants of you something else. The reader wants a story, right? The reader wants stuff to happen. The reader wants a plot, right, basically. And reader also wants characters, as we're talking about characters here tonight, characters that the reader can identify with in some small way, which doesn't mean to say they all have to be good, They can actually be quite evil. And if you think of it, of Richard III, for example, as a very wonderful example, who is able to be extremely wicked, but at the same time to seduce us as well as Lady Anne. There's that wonderful seduction scene where she's walking behind the bier, and this man, Richard III, has killed not only her husband, but her father-in-law. And he dares to come up and make love to her. And he says, basically, it's all your fault. It's your fault that I killed these men. It's because you're so beautiful. And he uses flattery, telling her how beautiful she is. And he also uses guilt. It's your fault. You made me do this. So it's very clever. Shakespeare, of course, is hard to imitate, but we can learn from the greats, I believe. So example of wickeds. There's another one, Uriah Heep, who probably all of you at some point read David Copperfield, and maybe you remember those clammy hands. So all you need is a detail like clammy hands for us to be engaged with the character. So don't forget the evils, the villains, and I'm particularly interested at the moment because I'm trying to do a female Tom Ripley at the moment. So I don't know if any of you know the Ripley books and the Ripley movies, but he's pretty wicked, but still we root for him. You want a character that the reader can root for too. So what is he going to get caught? For one, right? It's a good question. Will he be caught, or will he get away with it? We all have sort of part of us that will go along with something of that kind. There's this duality, if you will, between the writer and the reader. But there is also, for the writer, another kind of duality, and that is the imagination and memory, right? How much do we write from memory? We're using, supposedly you decide that you will use some of these characters that you know around you. How much of it comes from memory, and how much is your imagination? It's sort of, people say memory and imagination live in the same house. Well, they do, but maybe different rooms. And we have to kind of keep that sorted out. And I'm sure you've all had the kind of argument that one has with siblings or a partner where you've lived through the same thing, but you see it quite differently. I had recently, my dear husband is here tonight, kindly, and we were talking at dinner, I think, last night, and we may have been talking about crime in New York or crime, yes. I told a story about how we had taken a small elevator and a man got on with us. Nobody else was in the elevator, just us and this man who looked rather fierce, tall, and he turned to my husband, who is a doctor, and this was shortly after the COVID. He was still wearing his mask, right? And this man just looked at him, and he took it and he pulled it off him. And I was like this. And my husband said, we oldies have to kind of support one another and be kind to one another, or something of that kind. This man was not young either. And so nothing happened, and we were able to get out of the elevator. And so I told this story to one of my daughters was there, and my granddaughter. And my husband said, "But you weren't there at all. You weren't in the elevator. How do you know?" I said, he said, "I told you the story, but you weren't there. You know, how can you?" So, but in my mind, I was definitely there. So this is the kind of thing, though, where, you have a story and it comes up in very different ways. And in my mind, it was very vivid. I can see the elevator, I could see the man, the mask, all the rest of it. So who's right, who's wrong, it doesn't really matter, does it? But it is something that maybe we can remember. And I have another memory like that with my sister when my father died. And I was 7, she was 9. And I remember going into my father's room where he lay, and I see him grey on the bed with the oxygen tank by his side, glinting, and then being pushed out of the room by the nurse. And then there's another memory where my sister comes and says, "Oh, I just saw Daddy, and he's dead." And she was the one who told me. So which one was true? I'm not really even sure. And that's the thing about being a writer, too. You find that when you've written something, the memory is erased, right? It's gone because you've written it up. And it comes out differently. But it's something to remember because if you, I'm going to take a few sort of literary examples of memory and imagination and look at what happens. So the first one is the Vita Nuova, the first finished book by Dante. This was before he wrote the Commedia. And it's a love story. And you may not have read it, but I hope you will, perhaps, because it's wonderful. And it's full of original, extraordinary images. But the love story, I would not say is believable. I mean, this is one of the things that we are thinking about, right, when we come to the page, and that is the believable voice. How we go, because our reader wants things to happen, right, but they also want to believe the story that we're telling. And Dante, in this Vita Nuova, tells us that he falls in love when he is 9 years old, and his Beatrice is also 9, and he is struck by lightning. He's in love with her. And we know very little about what she looks like, where Dante is. We know, historically he's in Florence, and that actually, according to Boccaccio, this Beatrice was Beatrice Portinare, and she was the daughter of these very wealthy bankers. And anyway, Dante tells us then that he sees her 9 years later, and this time she actually addresses him. She actually talks to him, but we don't have the words, no words, still no real description, what color hair, what color eyes, what's going on in Florence at the time. It's all just what it does to Dante, how Dante then has to shut himself up in the room because he is so moved by this, what happens to him. And then Beatrice dies, and then it's, his grief and how he feels, and how this terrible grief about this wonderful, beautiful, beata woman is. And then he gets to a point where he says, well, I really can't go on with this. I've come to the end of the road, more or less, and that's the end of that. And I hope to be able to do something, use another voice, do something different, which of course is what he does when he goes on to write the Commedia and goes into the Inferno. But I thought it was so interesting to see how Dante, who, if you have read the Inferno, if you've read a little bit of the Commedia, has a wonderful gift with all the details that we need to make something real. So his Inferno, which is after all a made-up place, right, rivals the Florence, so that when Dante walks through the streets of Florence, people come up to him and say, but your beard isn't singed, you're not burned. They expect that he really did go down to hell, to the Inferno, and that he came back burnt, as many of the people in the Inferno are. So when he is using his imagination, in a sense, because no one has been to hell and come back and told us what it looked like, he is extraordinarily realistic. He gives us all those realistic details that we need to make something believable for us. And I'm sure you have been told this before. But interesting then to look at how memory, or what we think is memory, is important to give us those kinds of realistic details. If we are able to look at that and remember that. Another literary example, because after all, I think that our books come from three sources, right? They come from our lives, our imaginations, and also from literature. So we are influenced too, obviously, by what we write. So I'll skip many years from the Vita Nuova to talk a little bit about Scott Fitzgerald's Tender is the Night. And I was plunged back into these books because it was 100 years since The Great Gatsby actually came out. I don't know if any of you followed that, but it was published 100 years ago. But what I was really interested in was Tender is the Night, which was the book that Scott Fitzgerald then wrote almost 10 years after The Great Gatsby. The Great Gatsby came out and was not applauded the way we applaud it today. It did not have the great following that it has today. So he struggled with the next book for 10 years, until that came out. Tender is the Night. But he used there, and this is why I'm coming back to this, he used the people around him, right? The Murphys, Gerald and Sarah Murphy, who you probably have heard about or read about, and who lived, of course, they were expatriates and lived in the south of France, in Antibes. And we have that in Tender is the Night, with Rosemary, who is the protagonist there, who is our narrator, and who sees them with, this dewy eyes of youth. She's very young, and she's an actress, and she's there. And so we have this portrait, and perhaps some of you will remember this, some of you who might have read Tender is the Night at some point, or even seen there's some movies as well. Sarah Murphy is portrayed, these are the divers, right? Nicole and Dick Diver, and he's using the Murphys to create these characters. Nicole then is portrayed as on the beach, writing out a recipe with her pearls hanging down her back. And this wonderful detail of the pearls hanging down the back really gets us, involved in the reality of this woman's life. Dick is this charming man who is there as well. And of course, Scott Fitzgerald describes this. This is when the divers are sort of at the height of their glory in the south of France, and then he flashes back to their past and Nicole Diver's past, which has been so difficult with her. And of course, there we get much more of Zelda, the wife of Fitzgerald's wife, and also of Scott Fitzgerald himself. So we get his the alcoholism and the mental illness of Zelda. So when he had finished this book, Tender is the Night, Scott Fitzgerald sent it to his good friend Hemingway, right? And you've probably read things about Scott Fitzgerald and Hemingway and their interactions with one another. And Hemingway gets this and says immediately, his first sentence, if you can imagine sending your book, you've spent 10 years to write it, and you've struggled with it and been through many difficulties. And Hemingway says, which sounds like Hemingway, I liked it and I didn't. That's the first sentence, yes. So, and then it goes on from there, pretty much. And basically he says to Scott Fitzgerald, you started with the Murphys, you based these characters on the Murphys. Now, if you do that, you can't then switch and start writing about yourself. That's too confusing. Your past is not going to be the same as the Murphys' past. Advice which I must say as a writer, I find, because I find that characters very often come from many different sources and that we can put together many different parts, right? This letter is, you can find it. You can find Hemingway's letter to Scott Fitzgerald on The Tender Is the Night. I'm not sure that it's, he also says, just because something happened to you doesn't mean to say that it's very important to anybody else. Which is also a harsh thing, it seems to me, to tell somebody. Scott Fitzgerald, obviously, we're not sure exactly what he did with all this advice, but I do think, and this is maybe a little contradictory, but certainly I think sharing your work with somebody else can be very productive. And Dante did it, which is interesting, actually, because Dante, with his Vita Nuova, sent this image that he has in that book of he sees Beatrice being carried by the god of love. The god of love is carrying Beatrice in his arms, and the god of love has something in his hand, which turns out is Dante's heart, and he gives it to Beatrice to eat. This is in a sonnet. Somebody's nodding their head. So wonderful, wonderful imagination and wonderful, unique way of expressing something there. That is so I'm not saying that because of Hemingway's letter we don't share our work. I think that Dante then sent this to his friends too. It's interesting to think that in the 13th century, they were already doing this, sending their work to one another to have the opinion of their fellow writers. And Guido Cavalcanti, who was il primo amico, right, the first friend, Dante's, that he called on him. He was the one who told Dante to write in Italian. Don't write in Latin anymore. Write in Italian. It was just very good advice. Anyway, he tells him, he said, no, you want something a little more cerebral, I think, than this image of somebody eating somebody's heart. And he's also sent it to a doctor friend, and the doctor said, I think what you need is to take some cold baths. So that was his solution for the problem. Anyway, so we have this question of the duality here between memory and imagination. And having finished the Vita Nuova, which is, after all, an autobiography. You know, he writes about meeting Beatrice, meeting her again 9 months, Beatrice dying. It's an autobiography. And we have the feeling that this is a personal mythology. It's how Dante reacts to the various events, meeting her, seeing her again. It's all seen through Dante's reaction, which for the reader finally becomes a little tiresome. And I think Dante is aware of that. It's too imaginary. It's turned inwards. So we have to be aware of something of that kind, of not opening up the world to the reader, right? What does the reader want? The reader wants to be able to see these. So we do see the heart and the eating of the heart, which is very original and extraordinary. But we don't see Florence. We don't see what he gives us in the Inferno, which is, this winds, the buffeting of the winds, of this things of this kind, the reality of the situation of Florence at that time, of what was going on, of the popes, the political difficulties and things of that kind that Dante was able to write about later as he went on in his career. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around here, but to get to Scott Fitzgerald and Tender is the Night, which I think is a very beautiful book, and I don't see any reason why we can't start with somebody and then add on somebody else, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. We can certainly do that to create a character. So in my own case, of course, to get back to the creation of a character from our lives, I was driven to the page by anger, revenge, whatever you will, but I realized very soon that what I needed, of course, was a structure. So even if you are writing autobiography, obviously, you need a structure. You need things, there has to be some sort of causality. So that when Dante is just turning everything inwards and reflecting it through his own feelings, it's not enough. We need to turn outward to a more public space. And that's something for us to remember, and perhaps to look at some of these other writers who are able to do this so extraordinarily. And Hemingway's advice, don't think anything is important because it happens to you. That's or don't think. I would say rather, don't think that people are going to believe you just because it happened to you. And I think for those of you who have taught or who know other writers, you so often hear that story. People will say, someone will say, I don't believe this. I just don't believe it. And the writer will say, but it happened. My Uncle Joe did fall down the stairs and, break his leg and blah, blah, blah. So it's very important to create a narrator who is, and that, of course, Scott Fitzgerald certainly knew how to do in The Great Gatsby. And you'll remember Nick Carraway, who gives us this believable story. So we need the believable voice in order to be able to get to our reader, to reach the reader. Summing up a little bit here, some of the things that I have said, these different dualities that we are, these different conflicts, right? There is the conflict between the reader and the writer, right? The writer who has a story to tell, and the reader who wants. Also, I think one of the things that we need to remember is that the reader wants to identify with the character. So that's important. And as I said, you don't have to necessarily make just a good character in order for us to identify with them, but you have to give us enough details about the life of the character so that we can feel that find parts of ourselves connect in some way with what. And of course, we have this too, not just in literature, but also in art. I'm lucky enough to be staying in an area in Paris where I was able to go to the Musée Marmottan and look at the Monets again, the Monets water lilies, which I'm sure many of you have admired. So how much of that is just the eye seeing, the memory, what is actually real, and how much is imagination there? Those are two elements that are at play in art as well as in books and literature. Many of these things. So let me just sum up, as I said. So the reader and the writer, that the imagination, which we can't allow to go too far, and the memory, and what is real in our lives that we can use. And that is often the details that will anchor the reader in a real world, right? Details of place, details of even the clothes that somebody is wearing, details of that kind. And then also with Hemingway's advice there of not taking one's tragedies too seriously, I think perhaps what one can take from that a little bit is that a victim doesn't work particularly well on the page. You want somebody who's able to stand up and fight, at least, even if they don't win. So some kind of that. So maybe I'll just read a couple of pages from my memoir. This is a passage. It's called Tokolosh. You'll find out what that means and what that's about. It's just 3 or 4 pages, and about you were musing, obviously, my own mother, and to create a character here on the page. So it's called Tokolosh. Mother lives the lazy life of the privileged white woman in apartheid South Africa. She spends her mornings sipping tea, dressing up. She sallies forth in her flowered hat, gloves and high heels to visit friends or to shop in Rosebank, a suburb of Johannesburg. She spends our father's hard-earned money. He, 20 years older than her, doesn't seem to mind, though from time to time he says money doesn't grow on trees, and appears briefly in the evenings, going through the garden, turning off taps. Mother buys innumerable pastel dresses, leghorn hats with flowers and pale kid gloves, with buttons up to the elbow for herself, for her two sisters, her friends. She buys shoes. She has many pairs of small, delicate, expensive European shoes. She and her sisters are proud of their small hands and their feet, their soft dark curls, their hazel eyes. Appearances are most important. They are what has enabled her to advance. The clothes, the figure, the face. Clothes maketh the man, she says. Sometimes, unexpectedly, though she cannot spell, she quotes Shakespeare. She has the nanny dress us up in smock dresses, organdy sunsuits with little sleeves like wings, white socks and shoes. Above all, mother sleeps. She grasps sleep greedily in her clenched fists, as though it were the most precious thing in the world. She sleeps all through the long hot afternoons in the green light of her high-ceilinged room, with the shutters drawn down, one arm flung with abandon across her face, her dark curls clinging to her damp forehead. And she drinks. She starts drinking at sundown on the glassed-in veranda, surrounded by her two sisters and younger brother, while the blue hills disappear in the dim light. Holding up her empty crystal glass, Mother says, "Will you get me the other half?" Pie? Pie, the eldest of her three sisters, who is 2 years older than my mother and a little taller, jumps up obediently to bring Mother another drink, and after that another one. We learn there are many other halves in this whole, as many as she desires. None of her family, who are all dependent on her and my father's money, will even try to stop her. Her two sisters do her bidding. She's the middle one, the one they call Bill, because she was a tomboy. She's the lucky one, she says, the only one who's married a wealthy man, a hard-working timber merchant. There's a brother, too, whom they call Proe, but he doesn't seem to count or amount to much. It's a world of women who obey Mother. I have to wee, Mother says to my Aunt Pie, whose real name is Dorothy, but whom she calls Pie, perhaps a shortened form of Sweetie Pie. That's one thing I can't do for you, Pie says with a thin smile. Occasionally, the youngest one of our aunts, Hazel, the one who is considered the cleverest, who has worked for a while as some sort of secretary, who knows how to spell, dares to say what she thinks. As my sister and I are sitting in the back of Mother's Jaguar, and she prepares to drive us home after a party, Aunt Hazel puts her head in the car window and says, "You shouldn't drive the car with the children in the state you're in, Bill." Mother purses her lips with disgust. "How can she talk to me like that?" Mother says, driving off, weaving slowly, dangerously down the road. "Light me a cigarette, pet," Mother says, and I'm obliged to climb forward and push in the cigarette lighter to light up her Craven A, which makes me feel sick. Sometimes Mother changes. We do not understand what's happened to her. It's one of Mother's secrets, of the many mysteries that surround her. She becomes strange. Gradually she draws away from us into her own foreign world. We watch with increasing terror as her face alters, her mouth becomes thin, turns down at the corners, her words are slurred and almost unintelligible. She speaks another thick, thorny language, difficult to pronounce. Her gestures alter. She staggers. She walks stiffly in attempt at a straight line. We fear a witch has come and taken Mother's place, and we're not sure Mother will come back to us. This could happen to anyone, this terrifying metamorphosis. Worst of all, we fear this could happen to us. Once, lying side by side in our beds in the dark, we see a light glimmering in the big bay window in the nursery. It's the tokolosh, I say. I'm certain an evil spirit, what the Zulus call the tokolosh, has come for us, to take us away. We lie still, unable to move, to call out. Our nanny teaches us to kneel by our beds, press our hands together and pray. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, bless the bed that I lie on, 4 corners to my bed, 4 angels round my head, 1 to watch and 1 to pray, and 2 to bear my soul away. So
May
that's
we
just
have a round of applause, please?
a little.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We're running a little short of time.
Questions, anyway.
But what you just read, don't you think that exemplified exactly what she was talking about, that balance between imagination and memory? It was just beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, do we have some questions? Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm an aspiring memoir writer. And I was just wondering, when you were talking about structure, when you're writing a memoir and you starting, is that really the first thing you start with, is thinking about structure, or does the structure come later? Yeah. What is the first 3 things one needs to think about?
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes. No. Did everybody hear the question? Yes. I think, obviously, you need first to allow yourself some freedom on the page, right? I don't think that one can sort of abstractly come up with a structure. You probably have to go quite through a rough draft before that comes to you. In fact, this book, which I, published with Penguin, and a wonderful editor, Catherine Court, who was my editor. I had published some books with her before this came out, and I sent her initial draft. And she wrote back to me and she said, Sheila, it's full of wonderful things, but it's not sufficiently structured. And I was very taken aback, and I sort of said, but I know about structure. That's what I teach. I know structure. But it wasn't structured, because what is structure? Structure is, you have to find, obviously, a beginning and an end. And when you're writing autobiography, you don't, you're not dead, so you can't see everything, right? So you don't really know what the importance of the daily events. I mean, somebody that you might meet might have seem to have no importance to you, but you will realize perhaps years on that they are important. So it's very it's essential then to look and see that each thing leads to the next, right? The beginning leads you to your end, basically. And that's what structure is. It's causality, right? And basically something has to happen. You are going towards some sort of revelation or some sort of process of change. I teach a class at Princeton, a freshman seminar called How People Change, right? And I use a short story to demonstrate these moments of change. So it may be, Dante, for example, was looking at St. Augustine. He was reading St. Augustine, and St. Augustine talks about this, moment of revelation when I don't know if you all know of his stealing the pears. He's in this garden and he steals these pears. He doesn't even need the pears. They're not hungry. They give them to the pigs. But he steals the pears and he has a thrill. There's a thrill of the theft. And that causes a sort of conversion. And that's when he gets Christianity, the religion that he espoused for the rest. So working towards some kind of moment of change or crisis within, if you can, obviously an inner inner conflict that is in some way resolved, which is very difficult to do. But yes, no structure, I think. So, and for me, and it sounds strange, but I do think the plot, which sounds as if you're going to fabricate it, right? The plot is probably the most unconscious part of what you're doing. It just comes to you, hits you on the head, if you're lucky. And if you've perhaps been working on a draft for a while, and then think, oh my gosh, this is where I'm going with it. Yes. Other questions? Oh, here's one. All right. When writing
That's from Emma.
All right. When writing your memoir, how much research did you do into your own life, like consulting photographs, letters, diaries, etc.? Yes, I mean, I've written several historical novels, and that obviously one does a lot of research. With my own life, I didn't do some of those things that one could have done, perhaps, because my mother was a very mysterious person. I don't want to undermine the value of mystery. You know, you can't know everything, and the reader doesn't even need to know everything. You certainly don't need to tell the reader everything, you know. So mystery is, I mean, that's what's going on in that Vita Nuova. There's a lot of mystery. I mean, what is this little girl and this man, and where does she come from, and who is she, and what? But so I didn't go. There were things that I could have perhaps researched about my mother, and I didn't. I left it alone, and I had written my own versions of filling in the blanks, if you will. Photographs I did use, as you can see in the memoir, and those were very much appreciated. People like photographs, of course, and they like to see the reality of. So if you have photographs, that's very useful. Letters I have used in fiction. I wrote about a very young girl, and I was trying to think back on what, you know, I felt at that age, 17, 16, something, and I had some letters which I had written actually to my ex-husband, and he had been kind enough to keep them and sent them to me. And so I had these, what I had thought were love letters, which I had written when I was, because I met him very young, I was 17, 18. So I had these letters which I then read, and I thought, well, where's the love letter? They were not about love at all. They were all about what was the meaning of life, and things of that kind, you know. And that was very interesting. So I don't want to. I don't mean don't look at this stuff if it's meaningful to you. You probably, you know, I think one of the most important things is to get the right distance from the material that you're using, so that if it's too distant, then it's a bit boring for the reader. If it's too close, that's when you're not able to really use the right kind of memory. You're just seeing some idealized character that's going to come across as unbelievable on the page. So one needs, above all that, distance. Yes. Somebody else?
I think we have time for maybe just one more quick question.
Yes.
Hi, yeah, I'm working on a memoir about my grandfather, and he was born in 1901, so can't talk to him, trying to talk to other people. But I know you mentioned, like, with your memoir, the rage and revenge and kind of rerouting. But for me, I'm thinking about there are people still alive who would feature in the book, and, like, a colleague who was younger and, like, big. My grandfather was a big name, and so just figuring out how to address and talk about these people.
Right, right. Yes, I mean, that is something that I should have brought up along the way, and that is, what is the reaction of the people that are from the family if you actually write about them, or not just the family, but people that you know. And certainly I remember sitting down, with the lawyer before this book was published, and going through. If people are dead, then it's okay. You could say anything you like about them because they can't sue you. But if they're alive, and that has happened to me. I had an article that I wrote actually for the Paris Review, and I put in a real person, and I actually wanted to use the name because I wanted other people to know this was a doctor, actually, who was had behaved extremely badly, and I wanted people aware of that. But at the last minute, the Paris Review said, do you think you could just say he's dead or something of that kind? So that it becomes a problem. Yes, you do have to be careful. If they're alive, you have to disguise them. Right, you have to give them different color hair, at least, and eyes, and perhaps a different profession, if you can. You have to be careful. Yes.
Could we have another round of applause for Sheila?
Oh, thank you.